Old Joe lived way out in the country, didn't have but one neighbor, but it was a special neighbor. They were friends of his. They'd grown up together and gotten old, and both of their wives had died. Children had grown and moved off to live someplace else. And they pretty much did everything together. Well, they had until about a week ago. Some silly argument. A stray calf had wandered over on the neighbor's farm, and he claimed it as his, and Joe looked at it, he saw it, he said, no, I think that looks like it's got the same markings as my favorite cow, that's my calf. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. Well, it just escalated. It got to the fact that they really got angry at each other. That was about a week ago. And old Joe was still brooding about this on this particular morning, sitting in his kitchen thinking about it and getting madder all the time. Somebody knocked on the door. When he went to the door, he saw this young guy sitting there with a box of tools. And he said, I'm a carpenter, and I just wondered if you've got any odd jobs that you'd like for me to do. Well, Joe said, come on in. He didn't take the people right off. He invited the young man into the kitchen and sat down. He said, here, let me get you a little bit of the stew that I made. Had some homemade bread that he just baked that morning. And they were sitting there talking and visiting, and Joe sizing him up. He decided he liked this guy. He said, you know, I do have one project for you. Come over here and let me show you something. They went over to the window, and he said, you see that farm that's up against mine? That's my neighbor's farm. You see that creek that's running right down between the two? Well, that wasn't there last week. But we had this argument, and my neighbor took his plow and dug a furrow down between our two farms and flooded it with water from the upper pond. And if he wants to be that way, if he wants us divided like that, then I'm willing to do that too. I do have a project. I want you to build me a fence that's solid enough and high enough that I only have to look at him. Well, the young carpenter said, well, if you've got the lumber and the nails, I got the tools. And Joe said, good. He said, now I gotta go into town and get some supplies and stuff, so you get to work and I'll see you when I get back. And Joe hitched up his wagon and took off for town, and the young carpenter went to work. Well, it was almost sunset when Joe came back. As he rounded the bend, expecting to see his fence, his jaw dropped open. There wasn't a fence there. Instead, there was a bridge. It was a nice bridge that went across the creek that divided the two farms. And just about the time Joe was getting ready to lay into the carpenter for not doing what he told him to do, his neighbor started coming across the bridge with his hand out. And he said, Joe, you're quite a man. If you want us to be friends, I want to be friends too. Let's forget this. I don't even remember what it was we were arguing about. And as he held out his hand, tears came down Joe's face, and he ran across the bridge and hugged him, and they made up. And his young carpenter picked up his tools and started to walk off. And Joe said, hey, young man, hey, wait a minute. He said, I got some other projects that I'd like for you to do while you're here. The carpenter kind of smiled. He said, no, he said, I'd like to stick around, I really would, but he said, I've got some more bridges to build. And he walked off. Now that's the end of my story. I like to tell this story because it has such, I think, such rich meaning. When I tell it in church, I remind people that Jesus was a carpenter. Good story. I think you'll agree.